When people like me say that the United Nations is engaged in promoting a global cultural Marxist agenda that includes, amongst other things, the destruction of morality, normality, the family, which is basically the basic cell of any functioning society, and the promotion of degeneracy, whenever anyone makes such a case, one is dismissed as a conspiracist. The problem with that label is that it has kinda lost its power. There is such thing as conspiracy theory, which oftentimes tends to be loony, and then there is conspiracy fact. In the case of the United Nations, it's nothing hidden, but very wide in the open. Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Alright, let's read the news and then we'll comment. Coming from Yahoo News Australia, no gender December parents urged to buy a boy a Barbie to break gender stereotypes. You know where this is going, right? So, it goes like this, quote, "Parents are being urged to buy a boy a Barbie in the lead up to Christmas in the hope of smashing gender stereotypes that divide boys and girls and carry through to adulthood. The advice is part of the No Gender December, an annual campaign run by leading education publisher Good Education Group and backed by the United Nations. So, not backed up by regular Australians, not backed up by the clients, by the market, or any other force that can have a quality control. No. It's backed by the UN, an organization with way too much money and time on its hands, with zero accountability to the taxpayers around the world that fuel its coffers." Alright, let's read further. Quote, "Chief Executive Officer Chris Lester said the grassroots campaign," again, bullshit detector over 9,000, there is no such thing as grassroots campaign. You can't be backed by the UN and still be grassroots. You're either backed by the UN or a bottom-up initiative. Anyway, he said that the grassroots campaign encourages parents to buy boys' dolls in an effort to fight against gender divisions that see girls and boys turn away from possible careers later in life, News Corp reports. According to those behind the No Gender December campaign, the movement correlates with the perception that STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths, are fields dominated by men and avoided by women, Mr. Lester said. "The divide starts in childhood," Mr. Lester said, as, quote, "toy stores typically separate girls' and boys' toys. Workplaces tend to be sharply divided between pink and blue jobs." In Australia, the professional gender divide is stark, with the Workforce Gender Equality Agency suggesting a bloke quota should be implemented to perk up the number of men in traditionally female-dominated roles like nursing and teaching. According to the taxman, women make up over 70% of the education and training sector and almost 80% of all health and social workers, Mr. Lester said. But they represent less than 12% of the mining and construction industries, under a quarter of the manufacturing and transport sectors, and a tiny fraction of folks in IT. Yeah, and none of that is going to change, as in ever, at all. Unless Australia becomes a full-blown Marxist feminist theocracy, which, if they do, will mean the definitive bankruptcy of the nation. I mean, this is not an opinion, it's how reality works. Yeah, I know, reality has a patriarchal bias. Tough luck. Anyway, going further, at least in the world of IT, there is evidence of a direct correlation between the number of women in the United States studying in the field in recent years and the advertising they were exposed to as children. That is, again, a lie. The link they send you to is an article that I already debunked in my feminist economics video back in March. Basically, it has nothing to do with advertising or a sexist conspiracy or anything of that sort. The demographic shift in the IT industry has everything to do with the evolution of the nature of the profession. It became less artsy and more mathematics-oriented, and we are all better off for that evolution, including women who now work in very well-paying jobs that just happen not to be in IT, but nevertheless aided by the immense progress delivered to the market by the now male-dominated industry. Anyway, the rest of the article is just more of the same social constructionist garbage that starts from the fundamentally flawed premise that biology doesn't matter and that you can educate innate biological inclinations and tendencies out of an individual. You can't. However, you can destroy a lot of individuals by trying this. Confusion is easy to be sown into young people's minds, and then it takes decades to solve that. That is, if it is solved, because many of them commit suicide before they meet a rational adult to help them. It's a tragedy, really. But then again, the left is the master at creating tragedies where none had existed prior. Now, this gender-bending nonsense is, much to nobody's surprise, affecting boys a lot more than girls. And this is partly because biology and partly because intention. You will notice that the girls' natural resistance to attempt to steer them into masculine territory is not viewed as a problem by the social engineers du jour. But the similarly present natural resistance of boys to attempt to steer them into feminine territory is, almost without exception, regarded as a huge problem by the social engineers du jour. Now sure, every fraction of the social engineering machine has a different buzzword to explain this phenomenon. It's either toxic masculinity, alleged antiquated gender norms, the fags cry heteronormativity. Every subgroup of the pro-degeneracy lobby has its own lingo to complain about nature, but they all agree on one thing: boys must systematically be destroyed. Now, the boots on the ground, useful idiots for the cause may actually believe everything they advocate for, but the ideologues behind them do not. The ideologues behind them promote this solely because they know full well that well-rounded adult men are one of the main obstacles to getting an all-encompassing totalitarian state going without using overt force. In very blunt terms, adult, non-pussified men tend to resist tyranny. Very weak men, the more sexually confused the better, tend to either ignore or even accept tyranny. So the choice is obvious for the totalitarian when it comes to what kind of men they want. The same goes with families. Intact families that get along tend to have their own private safety net and their own civic networks and institutions. Thus, they tend to rely very little on the state and tend to vote the wrong way. So if you're a totalitarian wanting to gradually implement a totalitarian state, it is blatantly obvious that you have to tear apart as many families as you can. Now, sexually confusing their children through state education, indoctrinating as many members of the society as possible to uphold via peer pressure some gender-bending nonsense, and then indoctrinating the children when they're older to hate their family and to view their family as bigoted, as sexist, as racist, as heteronormative, as oppressive, yada yada yada. All of these are very good tools. If you want to advance a totalitarian agenda and those pesky families stand in your way, which almost invariably tend to do, that's the way to go. Now, I can already hear the typing. Oh, come on, Luciano, it's just a silly campaign. It's nowhere near that bad. Well, yes, it is that bad. Now, let's not forget, we're talking here about Australia, where the WHO agenda to sexualize children as young as 3 is mandatory in certain provinces or states, and where buying and selling sex toys for 3-year-olds is, a thing. We talked about these in the past here on Freedom Alternative. So yeah, this campaign, devoid of its context, does look horrible, but it doesn't look so sinister and evil. But when you put it into the context of the recent history, when you put it on a continuum, like feminists like to say, things become a lot clearer. And the UN stamp of approval is confirmation that this is a coordinated effort. Now, when I say coordinated effort, I don't mean it as a grand-scale conspiracy, but rather that a few bureaucrats at the United Nations are determined to support any such initiative, who see the opportunity whenever countries with subverted leftist deep states produce such an initiative. They basically feed off each other. That's why I always tell the legit conspiracists that reality is even worse than their conspiracy theory. Yes, certain sections of the UN are conspiring, but they show it openly, and, this is very important, they would never succeed if not for the local collaborators raised through subversion and placed into the deep state. It's really just a power play, nothing more sinister than that, just pursuit of power, naked power. The gender-bending nonsense is just the most convenient excuse and medium to deliver the necessary blows to the family and to men. They don't believe in it any more than you and I believe in it. Also, one more thing. This kind of nonsense is quite global. The same kind of initiatives are all too present in South Korea, in Taiwan, in South Africa, and basically in any country that is developed enough to actually afford this kind of nonsense. Because, again, leftism is a luxury problem. Heck, Taiwan just witnessed a huge march against the LGBT agenda being shoved down their throats via UN edicts this week. Most people don't want this, and never did. And in places where you can vote on these things, please do. Don't let the media tell you that you're in the minority, because you're not. You really aren't. And with all of that being said, let's hope for the best. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around on Freedom Alternative.